Shalom, everybody. Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome back to the Practical Parasha class. And today, Parshat Bo El Paro. This part of the Parsha that we're going to study today is to be found in the book of Shemot, the book of Exodus, chapter 12. In this Chumash, it's on page 165. Chapter 12. Okay? So the book of Shemot, chapter 12, Perek Yud Bet. And here is, amazingly, it may not seem so, but when you give it a little thought, you will realize that amazingly, this is really the beginning of the Torah. When I say this is the beginning of the Torah, or at least this is where the Torah should have begun, because here is where we start to learn Torah. What does Torah mean?
Instruction.
Directive, instruction, guidance. Here is where, as a people, we're going to receive our very first mitzvah. The misconception that many have, especially if we're uneducated, is that the Jews receive their mitzvot, the very first commandments, at Mount Sinai. That's not true. The very first commandment, and then more came along the way, was actually while the Jews were still in Egypt. As they were becoming a people. As they were about to be, in the words of the prophet, born into Am Yisrael, to becoming the people of Israel. They already received the mitzvah. Let's see what this mitzvah is. Chapter 12. Hashem said to Moshe and Aaron, in the land of Egypt, they were still in the land of Egypt, saying you, when it says in the verse saying, it means to repeat. This is what you're going to repeat to the people. This month shall be reckoned to you as the head, meaning the beginning of the months. It shall be to you the first of the months of the year. I am in chapter 12, in the book of Shemot, page 165. The bottom of the page. So here is where Hashem says, this month shall be the first of the month.
Rosh Chodesh.
So that is, first and foremost, the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh meaning the beginning of the month.
Head of the month.
The celebration of Rosh Chodesh, which will be the focus of our topic tonight. Rosh Chodesh. Interesting, the word that the verse uses is this. To quote the sages, that whatever it says in the Torah, this, one literally has to understand it as mar'eh be'etzba'o v'omer zeh, in quotations. One points with his finger and says this. In other words, you can only use the word this when something is present. A month is a concept. A month is a time span. What exactly does it mean when Hashem says this month? If this, following the rule, means that Hashem was pointing. Tells us the Medrash says Hashem said this to Moshe on the actual day, on the actual evening. As you can see the moon. As you can see the new moon. He pointed to the moon and he says, this is what the moon looks like, and you know it's Rosh Chodesh. And here comes the whole concept of Kiddush HaChodesh, literally translated sanctifying the month, the sanctification of the month. Let me explain. Let's go through history. Let's first take the halakha, like I always say. Let's first know the what, and then we will come to the why. The what and when, the technical, what is this all about? So, as I said, Hashem pointed to the moon and said to Moshe, this is what it's supposed to look like, and you know that it's a new month. The Jewish calendar is structured according to the lunar cycle. And this is a brand new innovation. Hashem says to him, as a people, you're going to be unique. You're going to be distinct. Not only as a people, and not only later where you're going to live, in the land, in the geographical location, but even in the time. The concept of time will be different for you. Why? Because your calendar will be formulated according to the lunar cycle, according to the moon. We'll find out later why. What's the significance of it? Again, remember, we're going through the technicality of it now. So Hashem showed him what the new moon is supposed to look like. And in fact, I want to share with you a historical fact, and there's actually a tractate in the Talmud, tractate Rosh Hashanah, literally meaning the beginning of the year, which more than one chapter of it discusses the rules, the details, the ins and outs of how this was done throughout the generations, the laws, the technical details of the making of the Jewish calendar, of the establishment of the new month. And what are they? In short, 2 witnesses, meaning 2 males, kosher witnesses, meaning not that otherwise don't have a checkered past, a checkered history, are not related in any way. It means they're kosher. They're fit to be witnesses, to be counted as witnesses as far as the Torah is concerned. They appear in front of the High Court, the Sanhedrin, the Beit Din, that was in Jerusalem, and more specifically in the Beit HaMikdash, in the campus of the Beit HaMikdash, of the Holy Temple. And they would give testimony that they had actually witnessed the new moon. They had seen the new moon. And when it was ascertained that their testimony is acceptable, they would be questioned, maybe even interrogated, to make sure that what they saw is not just an illusion or something, an imagination, or maybe a cloud that was somehow reflecting some light and therefore appeared to look like the moon, a sliver of the moon. And once it was determined that they in fact had seen the new moon and their testimony was accepted, the Beit Din would announce Mikudash, Mikudash. Literally means holy, sanctified, sanctified. This day had now become sanctified. It is indeed Rosh Chodesh. And that's how they would actually count the months, month by month. So you really didn't know exactly when Rosh Chodesh is. Now I underscore the word exactly because understand that if 2 witnesses showed up on a given day and the Beit Din, the High Court, according to its calculations, knows that it's an impossibility that they saw the new moon, they would not accept their testimony. It's obvious that it's flawed. Sometimes they would even go out of their way with interrogative
Random people?
Interrogative techniques in order to disqualify those witnesses. Imagine they showed up on the 25th day of the month. On the 25th day of the month, the moon is gone. You don't see it. The peak of the month is the 15th. That's when the full moon is. We always know in the Jewish calendar when the full moon is going to be.
Indeed.
You know, as you count the days from Rosh Chodesh. It's either the 15th or the 16th at time, as we'll discuss later. So if they knew that it's impossible that they saw the new moon, obviously they would disqualify them or do whatever it takes to have them disqualified. But in the event that everything panned out, everything seems to fit into the reality as they know it's supposed to be, then that's it. Or if they themselves saw the new moon, at times you wouldn't see it. Maybe in the cities you wouldn't see it, only in the suburbs, right? Because the moon's coming, depends where exactly and what side of the sky it is or whatever. And that explains why they would have to rely on the witnesses' testimony, people coming. In fact...
One quick question. How many witnesses will they perhaps interrogate in order...
Give me a chance. I'll give you...
Okay.
You only need one body of witnesses in order to qualify, which means 2.
Okay.
However, and this is an interesting thing that the Talmud discusses this,
Yes.
that it could possibly be that hundreds of people, and it makes sense, the moon is available for everyone to see.
Indeed.
So any concerned Jew who feels a duty to say, hey, I want to go make sure they know it's Rosh Chodesh, maybe I'm the only one who saw it. And this is where I was going to go, give you a small glimpse into what took place. In fact, we know on Shabbat, it's considered to be a desecration of the Shabbat to travel beyond city limits. In other words, on Shabbat, one is meant to stay within the city limits. More than 2,000 cubits outside of the city limits is forbidden. For this purpose, it's permitted. Because this is a positive command in the Torah. Namely, to go and establish Rosh Chodesh. This is the very first mitzvah they received. Furthermore, the Mishnah the Talmud even tells us that what happens if the actual witnesses for some reason are infirm, they're not able to travel such a distance, and they need someone to carry them. They need to be transported. So now it's not only them that are going to have to be transported the distance, or maybe somebody's going to have to actually carry them now, even in a bed. Imagine, if that's the then technically speaking, yes, you can do that, and it's not considered desecration of the Shabbat, because the Torah mandates that this is what needs to be done, and it's for the good, for the purpose of serving all Jews all over the world, knowing when Rosh Chodesh is, when indeed this is, the month, when this month began.
Interesting.
In fact, to take it a step further, once the two witnesses came, and this really is a response specifically to your question. I was going to say it, but it's good you asked that. Once two witnesses came, case closed. Once they've qualified a body of witnesses, we're done. We know when Rosh Chodesh is. The Talmud cautions us not to ignore all the others that came. The people who are en route, they don't know that witnesses have showed up already. They have all the best intention. And we are concerned, says the Talmud, that if we just go, thank you very much for showing up, but we've taken care of business already. What's going to happen the next time? They may not be too eager to come. So the Talmud tells us that there was a whole elaborate celebration, literally, set up for these witnesses. Even if they all came, and they all came on Shabbat, and you're like, oh, we need so many people. Even while you're traveling and you say, well, where you headed? Oh, I'm headed to Jerusalem because I saw the moon. Oh, I saw too. You know what? Let me just turn around and go home because it looks like they got some witnesses already. I can go home and save myself. I can use the time a little more effectively at home. No, you shouldn't. You know why? What happens if for some reason they're disqualified? And you may be the only peer of witnesses that's available? So you see how much we encourage them to come. They would actually make big, elaborate su'udot, feasts. So people who travel from far and near should come and feel like, wow, the welcome guests of the High Court, just to encourage them to come. This is how elaborate and how important this was. On this, remember, on this hangs everything, as we'll discuss soon. All the celebrations, whenever the Torah says celebrate Passover, celebrate Hanukkah, celebrate Pesach, celebrate every single celebration, with the exception of Shabbat, as we will discuss, depends on this calendar. And this calendar, God put it in our hands. Wow. As it says over here, this month shall be to you. Meaning you are the ones who determine this month. This is something phenomenal that Hashem puts in our hands. In fact, I should quote the Midrash. The Midrash says that when the angels come to Hashem in the heavens and say, God, when is Passover? They have to know, because the angels have their duties and they have to know, what prayers to expect and what mitzvot to expect. They're the ones who elevate them. Hashem says, well, let's go down to the court, down there in Jerusalem, and find out what they say. Whatever they determine, that's what goes. So you see that it's literally in our hands. Whereas Shabbat, the only aspect of Shabbat that's in our hands is our free choice, which really is not exclusive to Shabbat. It's to any mitzvah. We have a choice whether we wish to celebrate Shabbat or not. But Shabbat is Shabbat whether we like it or not. Shabbat is Shabbat whether I lit the candles or not, whether I ushered it in. 6th day of the week ends, the 7th day begins. It's Shabbat. Whereas the calendar, that depends on us. That depends on us. In fact, while you ask your question, I see you have a question, I will show you something phenomenal in the order of the prayer, how everything is so exact. Open up your Siddur for a moment. Go ahead. What's the...
So I can say that the Rosh Chodesh is sort of, it is a individual and personal responsibility.
It's not an individual, it's a collective one, and we're going to talk about it. It's a collective responsibility. There are certain things that, yes, technically every single Jew has a hand in it.
That's what I meant. But
it's a collective thing. In other words, not only is it a collective thing that I don't do it, I don't have the power to do it on my own. Obviously, it's the Bed Din representing all of us, each and every individual, collectively, when the Beit Din announces that it's Rosh Chodesh. But imagine if all those individuals got together and screamed on top of the lungs, Rosh Chodesh. It's not Rosh Chodesh, because you need to have both. You need to have the power and you need to have the know-how. You need to have the knowledge. You're going to know what is it that makes it Rosh Chodesh and what is it that disqualifies the witnesses and so on and so forth. So yes, it's on our behalf.
As a collective, okay.
The High Court with it.
Understood.
I want you to look here for a moment, just as a sample example, okay? A sampling. Look at the bottom of page 334 in the blue book, in the prayer book, okay? And you'll see something. The very last two lines. We say, "Blessed are you," page 334, I say. "Blessed are you who sanctifies." Who sanctifies? Now you see in the gray area it says the Shabbat, and that is because there are times the festival coincides with Shabbat, so then you have to mention the Shabbat too. So he sanctifies the Shabbat and Israel and the festive seasons, the festivals. What do you see here? Shabbat is sanctified directly by Hashem. The festivals are sanctified through the fact that we are sanctified by Hashem and charged with that authority, with that power to do so, and then the festivals. Just illustrating the fact how this is so much in our hands, in our power. And this now brings us to the next point. Okay, this is how it was done then. Okay? Interestingly, I just want you to know, and you see how always they were creative. You know, we think today, okay, imagine this went down today, amazing, within seconds it would be known all over the internet. 20 years ago would have been chain phone calls, within a couple of minutes you can have it across the entire world, all continents, everybody knows that the Beit Din announced Rosh Chodesh. How did they do it back then? Well, the way they did it back then, there was actually two stages. Originally, it was done by means of relay light, which means on the approximate night, you knew it's either the night of the 29th or the night of the 30th. You knew as it got dark, they would have a designated a person go up to a designated spot, a very tall peak around the Beit HaMikdash, and light a torch and wave it in a certain motion. And then the person on the next mountain would see it from a distance and do the same. And it says, and forgive me, I don't recall exactly the time, but within a short period of time, within just a few hours, all the way in Bavel, the Jews in Bavel, which is Iraq, knew that the Beit Din had announced Rosh Chodesh just a few hours ago. In other words, it was very clear. However, there was always, like we have, troublemakers, and there were those that always sought to make problems, and they would deliberately distort it. So imagine, people
how can you distort that?
Well, you're waiting up on top of a mountain, figuring that tonight's the 29th, it may be tonight, it may be tomorrow night. And suddenly you see the waving of thing. You don't know. There's nothing in that light being waved that says, I'm the real thing.
Yeah.
So you start waving yours, and imagine the distortion. Now this is serious stuff. Because remember, if they didn't announce Rosh Chodesh, it doesn't matter that you back there, thousands, hundreds of miles away, assume that it's Rosh Chodesh. You're going to start counting your day. Comes the 14th at night, you're going to do your Seder. That's not such a problem. You're going to eat matzah. Imagine you're going to finish Passover a day earlier. You're going to eat chametz.
Oh.
And still Passover because they started a day later, or vice versa.
That's grave.
Big problem. And that's when they had to change course, and they had to abandon this method and go to something that was absolutely more tedious, and that is using shluchei Beit Din, which means emissaries. Literally, people had to physically travel. People who were known to be to be sanctioned by the Beit Din, to be acceptable representatives of the Beit Din. They had their They had their credentials. That's the word I was looking for. They had their credentials, and they would have to travel from place to place to place to place. But this created an entirely new concept in Judaism, and that is why in Israel they celebrate one day the festivals as mandated by the Torah, as biblically mandated, and we in the diaspora celebrate 2 days. Why? Because it became a safek. Safek literally means doubt. You didn't know exactly. Because those are physically, those are people who have to physically reach the destination. They can only travel a certain distance by the time it's the 15th of the month and it's already Passover. So you're not sure. It might be this day, it might be that day. And that introduced an entirely new concept into Judaism, and that's the 2 days of celebration, the beginning and the end of the Sunday thing. And that's something we'll discuss at another time. The details of that deserves an entire class for itself. I want to focus more on the Rosh Chodesh. So getting back to it, so what do we do today? Today we don't have the Beit Din. We don't. We don't have the High Court in Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. We have courts, we have that, but this is, compared to the High Court, we're all mediocre, okay, at best. So what do we do today? What happens today? What is it that we are doing, or not doing, God forbid, to actually fulfill this commandment? It's a commandment, right? We have to all do it collectively. And how is our time in any way of value, meaning our calendar, is it or isn't it? And the answer is as follows. At a certain point, when the real, like we're going to use for lack of a better word, trouble started to set in, and the rabbis saw to it that difficult times are coming, and Jews will be dispersed all over the world. Whereas until that point, yes, you had the diaspora, but the Jews were very centralized. Either it was in Babylonia, or it was in Israel. Okay? Almost nowhere else would you find Jews. Maybe along the route, or give and take within a confined area, a confined geographical area. But that's it. But now the Jews are going to be dispersed. And as we see, a good example of it is how far Jews were dispersed, that you even have the evolvement of different customs varying between the Sephardic communities, right? Those communities in Spain, and the Ashkenazi, the European Jews. There was almost no communication, and that's how it evolved into being different customs, all stemming and evolving from the same Torah and the same principles. So, what we have, as the rabbi saw, is a problem. What are we going to do? We're not going to have a centralized Beit Din that has the knowledge. Remember I said it's not enough to just, and that can represent all Jews. To represent all Jews, they all just have to be together, unified, at least to some degree. And certainly not going to have the knowledge and the authority to do so. So what's going to be? How are we going to do it? So they formulated a calendar. The calendar by which we still go today. They formulated an entire system on which the Jewish calendar is based. And it includes all the principles of the lunar cycle and everything else, and many interesting safeguards. I'll just use one example. A safeguard as, for example, as to when Rosh Hashanah can fall out. You will notice that the first day of Rosh Hashanah will never, ever fall out on a Sunday, on a Wednesday, or on a Friday. And one of the primary reasons for it is because they were looking to avoid, for example, the event of Yom Kippur falling out on a Friday or on a Sunday. Because if Yom Kippur falls out on a Friday, then you have two consecutive days when you're not only allowed to do any work, not only the holy sanctuary days, but now you can't even cook, you can't even do anything.
You cannot even bathe. That's it.
Correct. So you see how they were able to, I don't want to use the word manipulate because it sounds like a negative word, but manipulate it within the confines of the law in such a way that it all works effectively, methodically, and most important, efficiently.
Well, they adapted, now, actually.
They used this calendar, but the interesting thing is that when we follow this calendar today, the question is, when we say it's Rosh Chodesh today, how is it Rosh Chodesh? We need a Beit Din to announce it. So imagine that they did it in such a way that it's pre-announced. And that's the amazing thing of Judaism, amazing thing of our existence. We connect all the way back to that Beit Din, to that High Court, whom we've never seen physically. But we are bound by their ruling, and it's as if they're here, present, and announcing the Beit Din, the Rosh Chodesh once again. Because otherwise, it wouldn't be Rosh Chodesh. It needs to be announced by the Beit Din. Furthermore, we do have some interesting customs in place, which again, for lack of a better word, mimic or somewhat replace or resemble this announcement of Rosh Chodesh, this formal announcement. A classical example is what's called Shabbat Mivarchim, the Shabbat that blesses the new month. I want you to look for a moment, and this usually we would do on Shabbat prior to Rosh Chodesh. Look at page 231. Page 231 in the gray box. Shabbat prior to Rosh Chodesh, we bless the new month. We announce when is going to be the actual quote-unquote birth of the new moon. When is going to be the rebirth of the moon. And then we announce the Rosh Chodesh, the day that's actually designated for Rosh Chodesh. Because remember, Rosh Chodesh has to be a full day. You can't start at a certain hour as Rosh Chodesh. So Rosh Chodesh is a full day. And by announcing it, and then we also take advantage of the opportunity and use it as a moment of prayer to ask Hashem to bless the month, to be a good month, and to be a month of redemption. Because remember, that is the greatest reminder as we stand at the Bima. And we remember, oh my gosh, we're doing this every month, but this is not the optimal way it should be done. Don't we want to go back to the times when it's going to be done the right way when Mashiach's here? So we include both a prayer for that month being a materially and spiritually good month, and also for the greater blessing that Hashem should bring the redemption. Okay? And we do that. We also do on Rosh Chodesh itself, we say special prayers. And that brings me to the next point. What happens on Rosh Chodesh? What is Rosh Chodesh? Is it a special day? Is it a day that is a festive day? Is it a day that we refrain from doing any work? And the answer is yes, no, yes. Depends what. In the times of the Bet HaMikdash, there would actually be a special offering on Rosh Chodesh, like they would do on Shabbat and on the festivals, which tells us this is a special day, this is a festive day. There are those opinions, those halachic codifiers who argue that on Rosh Chodesh you should refrain from work like one would, or under the same rules that one would follow in the intermediate days of the festivals, and when it's permitted but encouraged not to do work. Others say no, we don't go that far, and the fact is people go to work, it's another regular day. However, tasks that are not absolutely necessary, or we are now with the government shutdown, so are non-essential, better push it off for another day because this is a special day. But we definitely do add prayers, such as the Musaf, to commemorate and to replace that special offering. Musaf means the addition, the additional offering. We say the Hallel. Hallel is not the entire Hallel like on a festival, but almost the entire Hallel, which is the song of praise to Hashem, praising Hashem for what? For all His miracles, for all His kindness, and this is a day of atonement. Rosh Chodesh is a day of atonement. So in that prayer, we're thanking God for the renewal. Not just a physical renewal, not just a renewal in time, but the fact that Hashem gives us the opportunity to always come back and be renewed. Then we have on Rosh Chodesh, we also of course say the special Ya'aleh V'Yavo. Let me just show it to you in the actual Amidah. And in the grace after meal, we say Ya'aleh V'Yavo, which is again a mention of the festivals, mentioning the sanctity of the day. Look on page 50 as an example. This is in the Shacharit, in the weekday Shacharit, in the gray box. And it's interesting what happens in the event that somebody forgot. If somebody somehow forgot to say Ya'aleh V'Yavo, then one needs to study the laws, to know when one needs to actually repeat the entire Amidah. In other words, the entire Amidah may become disqualified. In short, if you forgot it at night, in the nightly prayer, in the Ma'ariv, then you don't have to repeat it. During the day, during the Shacharit and Mincha, you would have to repeat the whole prayer. However, if you caught yourself, if you remembered before you actually completed the entire prayer, I'm not going to go into the details of the law. One should definitely just review in the Siddur. In fact, in this book, amazingly, they put in a concise order of all the laws, pertaining to the day-to-day prayers and so on. So it would be worthwhile to actually read it back and know, become familiarized with what happens if one forgot it, when you forgot it, at what point, do you need to repeat the entire Amidah, only part of the Amidah, and so on and so forth. And then we actually even do special commemorating actions, such as we even add the reading of the Torah during the morning session, even if it's not a Shabbat, even if it's not a Monday or Thursday, we typically read the Torah. The Torah is brought out, and we read a portion from the Torah that speaks about Rosh Chodesh, the offering of Rosh Chodesh. Then there's a special chapter of Psalms which we say after the song of the day, and that chapter connects us back to the major Rosh Chodesh, which is Rosh Hashanah, which happens also to be Rosh Chodesh, the first of the month, the first of the year, which is the greater Rosh Chodesh. Because this chapter, look on page 75 for a moment, this chapter speaks about the greatness of Hashem's creation. So you see how it relates to Rosh Chodesh. Every Rosh Chodesh is a mini Rosh Hashanah. And then there are even opinions that you need to have a special Su'udah. There's supposed to be a special meal, a special feast on Rosh Chodesh. Although the conclusion, follow this, the conclusion is that the law does not mandate, does not obligate one to have a meal, but it's certainly recommended. Some even go as far as saying that it should be similar, it should be celebrated similar to the way one would celebrate during the festivals, even during the intermediate